Um, Thank you, Sue. um, uh, we're going to hear from John Stossel from Princeton University. The title of his presentation is The Year of the Dog, which I love. Um, we've been playing with data groups here at Rowan. We have a banner working data group and trying to get people across the university on board with auditing, identifying, clearing up, and fixing, and using data in the right way. So I'm also interested in your data comfort concept. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from you, John.
Awesome. Thanks. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to talking about dog. I like talking about any chance I get, so I appreciate the time. So just a little bit about myself. My name is John Stossel. I'm an institutional research analyst at Princeton. August 8th will be my 10th year at Princeton, which is kind of unbelievable. I have no concept of time anymore, but time does fly. And one of the first groups that I had ever seriously got involved with at Princeton was the first version of Dog. It's been the same name since I joined, but the focus has changed quite a bit over the last few years, and that's sort of what I'm going to walk through here, like the nuts and bolts of what Dog actually is and what we do, how we present, formats of presentations, so that hopefully it inspires at least to some degree. And motivates you to join one of these groups that you might have locally or start one yourself. And the emphasis I have here, which is, it's great that it was mentioned on data comfort, comes from a lot of these groups tend to use the phrase data literacy, which when we were first reformulating this group, we thought maybe the right way to approach this is to not use data literacy, because from a few of our perspectives, data literacy automatically intimates that folks are data illiterate, and we didn't want to take that stance and encourage people to come, but be like a savior to them and we're such great data nerds that we're here to teach you. It's much more, we want to include as many voices and perspectives as humanly possible, regardless of how you use data, and do it in a comfortable way. So I thought it would be helpful to sort of kick off this presentation in much the same way I would kick off one of our dog meetings. Since we have so many groups from across campus, I think it's like 34 individual offices typically join, that I tried to come up with a somewhat clumsy analogy here, which is how we came up with the logo itself to begin with. So here, much like our group in NJ Airs, you could think of these as we're data stars. We're spread out across galaxies or throughout the universe, and sometimes that's what an institution feels like, with how separate our work actually is and siloed our work actually is sometimes. But we're doing similar stuff. If we start to think about how we wanted to guide one another, then we would start to form the shape of a constellation. So they're still stars, but they're starting to loosely form some kind of coherent shape. And we're starting to see how each of our visions, at least through the lens of data, start to align. And if we draw some lines between those and make connections with one another at these meetings, well, then you have dog. So oftentimes at the beginning, people were like, wow, that's really cool. And now that I've done it 5 times, people are like, yeah, can you get past this first slide and just be done? But I do think that it emphasizes that we do different work with data, but we should share those best practices and make connections while we're together at the working group. So is it really the year of the dog? Well, it actually is not, but be ready for dog puns all over the place. Dog is typically the perfect place to share puns and get those off your chest. It is actually the year of the dragon in 2024 this year. In Chinese zodiac. We won't have a year of the dog until 2030. But when it is 2030, the year of the dog is supposed to emphasize the readiness to help others, which is also a common trait in this data analytics working group, that above anything, we just want to help each other out and share best practices so that we can fill the gaps in our knowledge with our individual experience. So what am I going to go through throughout this presentation? Well, where did this originate in the first place? It was not my idea. I'm merely kind of carrying this forward with a group of individuals in this planning committee. What is our purpose? The dog does bite, meaning there are challenges working with this type of group and trying to carry it forward and keep momentum up over the course of an academic year or two. There are successes too, which I'll get into. What is our committee structure and how do we actually get stuff done? This is totally voluntary. So at different times of the year, we used to be able to say like, oh, this is my downtime of the year. I'll have time to work on the dog stuff, but it's it's totally disrespectful to most people on campus to say that they have a downtime of year. Everyone's busy all the time. It's just different types of busy. So how does volunteer work fit in that? What types of topics do we cover and what are our meeting formats? What experiences have we had with inviting speakers, either locally or the dream would be from outside of campus, like more expert and technical speakers. The fact that we do offer lunch is a big is a big bonus. That tends to attract people. And then what are we doing that might be unique to our group that keeps things fresh and encourages continuous learning and encourages people to come back? That's my own dog, by the way. So how did dog originate in the first place? It was actually originally conceived with a lot of ingenuity and forward thinking from two people on campus. One person is Valerie Ching. She now works in industrial relations at Princeton. The other is Drew Allen, who is now of Harvard. He's in institutional research as well. And this is way back in 2017. What makes this original group a lot different from the one that we have now is that it was much more specialized and technical then. So about 10 or 15 individuals would show up to these meetings at lunch and share things that they were working on. But on a scale of 1 to 10, it was more like in the 8 or 9 in terms of how technical and jargon filled those conversations actually were. We did some of the same things like share our analytics and data projects that we were working on, successes and challenges. They could be at any stage of development. So it'd be someone showing up doing a presentation. It could be like in the first few weeks of them pulling together a dashboard of some kind or a resource and sharing, hey, I found this cool way to do this. I'm still struggling with this over here. Does anyone here have any experience working on this? But again, it was really in the weeds, technical type stuff. But it did attract a wide variety of folks from different offices ultimately before the reins got handed over and we restarted this group as Dog 2.0. So what is our purpose now? What do we see our vision as? Well, we want to encourage that same amount of dialogue amongst all these different data users, whether they're heavy producers of data analytics projects on campus or at the total other end of the pipeline. They're just consumers of something that somebody else built. And maybe they have like an extraordinary story to tell using this data set and using this resource, or they want to come and share like, still have trouble to this day using this thing. Can someone here help me? And that's why we want to emphasize that our work with data is interdisciplinary. So it doesn't matter if you are a program manager for first year orientation, you're working with students, and you might see a data point from the orientation survey at some point, or you are working in business intelligence for finance and treasury, and you're doing business insights type work every single day of your life. It doesn't matter. We want you there. We also want to focus on creating projects, delivering them, how they're received, how people interact with different resources on campus or the data sources themselves. And all of this should be done in a welcoming environment. So we don't want to make it seem like this is a club exclusively for data folks on campus. If you're interested in joining and you work in campus life, or you work in the dean of the college's office or with graduate students, or you're in the office for religious life for that matter, you have a seat at the table at DOG. So instead of saving all this stuff and burying it at the end, I wanted to share what some of the challenges were so this could serve as context for how you consume the rest of the presentation. And there are challenges and there are successes, just like kicking off any one of these groups. The biggest one probably is encouraging participation on campus from people who actively work with data and tapping into their expertise and getting them to actually share, whether that's in a presentation or sharing a resource on Teams or through our listserv, any way that people could participate, we want them to, not exclusively doing a formal stand-up presentation of some kind. Part and parcel to that is teaching people that they do, in fact, actively work with data. And some folks will tell you to your face, I'm not a data person. I don't work with data. I'm not sure. Somebody encouraged me to join this group and I came to this meeting and I loved it, but I'm not sure why I'm here. Trying to solve that problem and teach people, you might not work with numbers on a daily basis, but are you observing how an event that you planned went? Are you collecting anecdotal information or observational data from how a program went? Well, then you do work with data, either directly collecting it, or you have anecdotal knowledge that would be useful in a data setting where we're sharing some of these more formal measures from a survey or from a system of record. And that means more perspectives, more voices, more people, and that aids in the reducing of discomfort and the fear of data, the more we get folks talking about it in this type of setting. And another difficulty is the shared responsibility aspect, the voluntary nature of formulating one of these groups. Oftentimes it's like a push and pull of who's pulling the weight at different times of the year, and how do we coach everybody up on the logistics for planning one of these meetings, which I was not your typical, let me figure out how to plan something. Let's call conference and event services. I need help. I need administrative help to walk me through how to do that. But that's professional development. That's a skill that a data-centric person ultimately should learn, because we should be sharing our knowledge and our expertise with folks. And what better way to do that than learning how to get somebody in a room with you to share that knowledge? How do we make sure that nobody is lost along the way? Again, making our presentations and our sessions accessible and relatable to folks, as opposed to using jargon and making the content way too lofty, just customizing and understanding who may be in the room, and creating the least restrictive environment possible. And also, we've been struggling with this lately is, are we an official group where we need sponsorship and we need a line of funding, and how much money are we going to be spending each year? Or are we truly a grassroots organization that can still be relatable to folks and still get our roots out into different corners of campus, where if we had an official sponsor, they might have control over what we tend to cover in our sessions, as opposed to we have control over the content now. And then, where does the dog live? Right now, we do not have a website presence of any kind. We've been sharing content resources on Teams. You'll hear from a lot of folks that I hate Teams. I only work with Teams in this setting. I only work with Slack in this setting. I don't know when any of these meetings are. Just getting a home for where dog sits would be great in the next year of the dog, so that we can point people to that we are a thing, and here is when we tend to meet, and this is where you can find dog stuff. So what is our structure? Quickly run through this. We have 6 different offices on campus that are more data-centric, who are the stewards of dog, or we're on this planning committee together. From human resources, and tapping into that a little further, that's reporting and data analytics within human resources. In our Office of Information Technology, no surprise there, it's a Tableau developer, data engineering. In the provost office itself, it's myself and Jed Marsh, and then our data governance folks as well. We also have folks from finance and treasurer, business insights, financial services, no surprises there, in data analytics world. The Office of the Dean for Research, so research and progress administration, and our vice president for facilities, so operational engagement and impact analysis. So you might wonder, how does this collection of folks that have work to do actually get stuff done? Well, the majority of this, again, is voluntary, and 90% of it is, okay, we need to plan these sessions. We need to come up with what our topics are going to be, how we're going to do it, secure a space to have said meeting, arrange lunch. Um, a lot harder than it actually seems most of the time. But those tend to be the things that we want to cover up front 3 times a year. Fall, October, and winter. That's in February. In the summer, we have a summer session, which still attracts 30-ish or 40-ish people, which we do at the end of June. And that may change as time goes on. We could have more, we could have less. But another component of this is once people do show up, we do have goals and objectives, which I shared earlier. How would we actually know that we're approaching any of those goals and objectives or tapping into them at our meetings? Well, we have a short survey because we're institutional research, so why not? To capture whether or not folks would be interested in a different topic in the future, if they're interested in presenting in the first place, or if we're digging into some of our core values like increasing comfort or exposing folks to data work that people are doing across campus. Again, more setting up meetings and the development of topics and themes for each of the meetings. That can be extremely difficult to do amidst all of the work that people are actually doing in their day-to-day. But coordinating how we're going to meet in between sessions, who's delegated the responsibility of coming up with topics or soliciting presentations over time. All of these we're trying to codify these into like our roles and responsibilities type things for our data analytics working group. So what have some of our meeting topics been? This was actually one of the logos for our dog summer share this year. Dog had some time on the beach. So when we restarted, we wanted to make it the data or the presentations more varied than just having somebody stand up and share like a cool thing that they were doing, which was really, really helpful. But we wanted to curate the content and the topics a little bit better. So this is just an example of some of the things we have covered. We talk a lot about statistical significance, and we a longer time ago, we would include the chi-square statistic in any Excel spreadsheet that we sent along for survey data. And over time, we thought it would be more helpful just to teach folks try to identify what's practically significant to them, because statistical significance sometimes means nothing depending on the audience that you're talking to. So how could they use their own anecdotal knowledge and experience to inform how they interpret data that's in front of them? What is data restriction on campus? What are our data rules and confidentiality policies? What does that mean practically for pulling together data and ultimately making it useful? Again, using survey data as the example. Are we suppressing cell sizes of less than 5, or would it be helpful for a higher level administrator to see the detail in the data? And how do we make those decisions? Or how is something like federal race ethnicity formulated in the first place? Common knowledge to most, if not all of us. But once you start talking to down the stream consumers, they may not be as familiar with that or know what IPEDS is at all. So how do we make that more informative and engaging in this type of setting? What is university data policy? Sharing something that's really in the weeds, such as the undergraduate student outcomes project, which I know my boss Jed was in another session talking about today. What is student records data? Having somebody come in from the office of the registrar and actually show folks who pull reports down on a weekly basis where their data is actually coming from and where our student records data ultimately goes if we're shipping it off somewhere or reporting it, and how we curate it and make sure that we're maintaining confidentiality. We had a session on artificial intelligence back in the fall. That AI session was an open discussion where people could share their experiences or lack of experience working with AI. It was a really good open share of that folks just either were really interested or scared about the prospect of integrating this into their everyday work. And folks submitted questions that they had ahead of time so that we could use them as discussion points in an open discussion, which changed up our meeting format quite a bit. It was pretty nice. And then we had folks from facilities come in to talk about facilities operations and how they utilize Tableau to visualize facilities operations on campus. So in one of those presentations, they were talking about how our facilities folks have handheld tools like a tablet, and each time they are emptying a trash can or they're fixing a leaky pipe, it is in real time being aggregated in a Tableau dashboard that the head of facilities is able to tap into and meet with individual folks. In another setting, we also had a facilities person come in and share a dashboard for like pest control on campus. So I was actually able to see where most of the mice and cockroaches tend to congregate on our campus. But that, again, that was a very engaging presentation and engaging person to do it because it's just another use for a visualization tool that folks might not have thought of to begin with, and making those connections were important. So, what are some of our meeting formats we tend to lean on so far? And the first and foremost, we started off with pairing a subject matter expert on campus, a true data analytics producer, someone that is creating resources with whichever tool, and then sending it off to an end user who's tasked with using it for strategic planning purposes. So that would be the campus partner or the consumer, and having them present together to share successes and challenges and where those tools started and what need they fulfilled over time and the data set that they're using. We had the facilitated open discussion, that artificial intelligence discussion. And then we've also promoted doing mini presentations or lightning talks that are 10 to 15 minutes in length, mostly because not everybody is a seasoned presenter nor wants to be a seasoned presenter, but they may have something interesting to share and valuable to share. And doing it and making the environment seem comfortable and informal for them to do that, even if it were 3 to 5 minutes. We want that voice at DOG, as opposed to saying, this needs to be an academic presentation. It needs to be 20 minutes long. That tends to be more restrictive than it is welcoming. And then these are the dreams for meeting formats. Dogs definitely do dream. Having guest speakers come in either locally. We tried very hard to get an AI expert as a faculty member from Princeton 5 or 6 times. And faculty members are faculty members, and they are busy people. And trying to reach out 3 or 4 weeks in advance was probably way too late. So that's a lesson learned. But you take those lessons and then we think about, okay, how would we and when would we reach out to a faculty member or an expert here or somebody outside the institution to share their expertise with us? Doing a poster session of some kind, again, trying to make it more relatable, more informal, cross the interdisciplinary boundary, so to speak. And then who's an expert on X on campus tool-wise? If there is somebody who is an Excel power user, like Lorena is in my office, then sharing that expertise with other folks on campus to make them more comfortable using a tool that they might use every single day, and they just have a certain point that they have not gotten past because a lot of times the time to do professional development just isn't there. But coming to lunch and having some quick tips shared with you might be life-changing for a professional on campus. Quickly, we've come up with a template for what we would do if we were inviting speakers to DOG internally. So this is amongst our DOG group of 60 folks that tend to show up, sometimes like on the lower end of that. Just giving them some background on what we expect presentations to look like. So like I mentioned before, they can be short and sweet. It's most important that you're sharing multiple viewpoints. That's the critical component. You could team up with somebody in your department to share some of the workload of doing a presentation or sharing an idea, or team up with somebody in another department. That having that camaraderie or 3 or 4 folks up there with you might make the experience more comfortable, and that's what we want. No level of expertise or experience giving talks in a formal setting is required at all. And your work does not have to be finished, maybe not even started. And you're getting up there and you're sharing you're proposing something that you want to get feedback on. That's really, really critical. And the people that we have in that room would be invaluable to get feedback from. And otherwise, you wouldn't get that connection, that feedback anywhere else. And making those use cases that we do share tangible and relatable so as many people there can maximize the benefit of having your advice and support. And it should be based on realities, not like something that's totally pristine and perfect, and sharing that any skill or experience is valuable to everybody that's in the room. This is an example, it's hard to read, but of my outreach to a professor on campus. I thought, I was like, well, we might want to have this be reusable later on. So coming up with a formal way to say like, hey, this isn't just some random group reaching out to you. This is DOG. This is what we do. This is how we meet. This is what we tend to talk about. This is who you could expect to be at a meeting. Would you be interested in presenting on your area of expertise? And just saving this somewhere so that later on down the line, if DOG is still around, somebody else could pick this up and say, hey, this is a good idea. It's quicker for me to use this template than try to come up with my own way to entice a faculty member to speak. So we do provide lunch at our 3 meetings, all but one so far, and that was the summer share. That was more like we had snacks and drinks available. But food makes a difference. However, you're able to obtain said food. That tends to be like the complicated part. And it's at the right price for the folks that decide to join. It's a free lunch. No need to brown bag and bring your lunch if you don't want to. My biggest tip would be that people hate mayonnaise and they don't want it anywhere near their sandwich or wrap. That can be distracting from the ultimate goal of having DOG in the first place. So just word of warning if you're getting one of these groups together and you're ordering lunch. Now I was just going to share some examples of resources and ways we try to get folks engaged at different meetings. This was so we have folks coming there, they get lunch. We came up with this placemat when we had our artificial intelligence session that was like a diner placemat that kids would play on, but they had all different DOG themed AI activities to do. And a lot of this content were terminology and definitions that would be intimidating if you had no idea, like me, what AI was or what somebody who's talking about AI is actually trying to get across to you. So trying to make the terminology more relatable and more comfortable to folks, regardless if they actually did the word search or not. I did see some folks coloring, which was a big success to me. But trying to figure out different ways to be nimble and be creative and different, as opposed to the typical presentation that you're used to. We do have the feedback survey where we ask questions that more or less relate to our goals and objectives. So rate your level of comfort working with data to produce visualizations or consume visualizations on campus. And so far, what we've seen is people in our audience are comfortable producing data visualizations because we're still attracting those power type users. But we do have folks increasing over time who do share that it's uncomfortable consuming visualizations. Whether you're a power user or you're the end user, that is something that we want to tap into and keep track of, because ultimately those are the folks we want to have at our meetings so that we can decrease that discomfort over time. Then trying to dig at what were the reasons why you actually came to this meeting in the first place. Did someone voluntold you to do it, or were you actually interested in the content and the subject matter of the meeting that we shared in a save the date? Did you want to learn something new that you could apply to your own work from some of the presenters that were going to be there? Or you just wanted to expand your knowledge of who does what with data on campus? That's fine too. And then we take that data from that survey, and whether we have 10 people respond to that survey out of attendees, we put a QR code up at the end of our meeting so that people can just scan it and participate. We do get a decent response rate from the folks that do attend, but we want to keep our thumb on this regardless of the engagement with the survey. And then internally with our DOG planning committee, sharing these numbers back and really digging into what people want, what are people feeling like we actually accomplish and do well at these meetings, and what are they still looking for, and tracking that over time. And then we have, and I'm fairly interested in this just because I love visual type stuff. Tried to make a identity for ourselves so that people automatically see this little dog, the Canis Major constellation. They think like, oh, that's the data analytics working group, or that that logo looks like something Dog produced. And trying to tag in teams anytime we were sharing a resource. When we first started this thing, we tag it with scoping out resources or making contact. Who could you get in touch with on campus if you had a question about this data set? The one in the bottom right-hand corner was when we had our eclipse. We happened to send out a save the date for better or worse for a dog meeting on that day. And it was like, who in the heck is looking at their computer today? Everybody's outside. Trying to have a little bit of fun with that, and just finding a way to get people hooked that's not just the data itself. Is trying to make it fun and loose and engaging for everyone that might want to join. Making data relatable is really, really important in this space. So for me, I said earlier that Q&A might not be your thing, particularly here, or typing in a question, but if you had a question you want to save for another time, or ask me about the nuts and bolts of Dog, then I'm happy to answer any emails if you reach out to me. Would love to.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions?
Sure.
Well, I, for one, I'm going to steal the data comfort words across our group. And we have a smaller group in that we're focusing on our banner student information system and all the peripheral offices that use the banner data, like finance and HR. And I find it's pulling teeth I keep calling the meetings, and the same people do the work all the time. The same people present the issues all the time. So yeah, it's a struggle. I mean, obviously you're doing some successful things, and maybe we need to have lunch, but it's the state of New Jersey budget. So, but we did a lot of good things. It's just that we're kind of stalled. So this is kind of energizing for me to hear your presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we tend to have a lot of the same. I shared that as a challenge, is same voices, same people up in front of folks talking about a data set. Whereas there are so many, just because of working, in program evaluation and surveys, we just happen to know and connect with so many corners of campus that I want to utilize that person that works in the PACE Center for their or civic engagement, for that matter, for how they utilize student records data and how they see it, so that somebody who is a data steward can tell them, hey, you were actually on the ball with X, Y, and Z, but here's something, a tool or a resource you might be able to use to make your work a little bit more streamlined. But we haven't gotten to the point where somebody is like, hey, I want to share my struggles and my challenges working with this data set that's more central to campus.
We have a related question. What are some good ways to get buy-in from other officers and groups around campus?
So that's one thing I failed to mention that I wanted to mention, was that we've had this little core Dog committee of about 11 or 12 individuals for a little over a year now. We are totally admitting that some of our ideas are probably getting stale, and there should be an opportunity for other offices on campus to be a part of that core committee. So now we're reaching out and asking for volunteers. We might get 0 volunteers from our whole Dog committee on the listserv. It's like almost 300 people. We're not expecting a lot of engagement, but we would like to see 4 ad hoc members join for like a term of 1 academic year. Number one, so that we get more perspectives from student life and from the graduate school, or from the library for that matter, or from university services. Or it doesn't matter. We just need more different perspectives and voices for planning these and focusing on topics. The other component of that is that it would relieve the pressure off of the existing committee. That's a bonus. And we would stop regurgitating a lot of our own ideas and get new, fresh perspective it does serve as an echo chamber after a while. If at certain times of the year the same people are pulling the effort and they just so happen to have the same ideas over and over again. It's easy to do, but we want new and fresh voices. And it also serves as a vehicle for professional development. So say you're a young analyst, or you're a younger professional working with data, or you might be somebody who changed careers and you're new in your role, and you just want to get more exposure to the campus at large and folks who work with data. That would be the perfect place to get professional development and working on a group, planning stuff out, making sure that everything is all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. That's invaluable experience, at least from our perspective. So we're trying to open that up to more groups. So that might be one way to get more people engaged.
So for my group, or for Rowan, I didn't throw such a wide net, right? So I knew who the people were who are going to help me get stuff done. And I, did have representation, but it was the usual suspects. It is the usual suspects. So, yeah, throwing a wider net would be very useful. So, I mean, we might be ready to do that now. Any other questions? Oh, wait, there are. Sorry.
Yeah, DOG is definitely, it is not a typical standing working group where we are talking about and circulating the same ideas or issue, or working on a strategic problem of some kind. We are much more about, at least from my perspective, trying to get people engaged with data work on campus. That is the charge of the working group, is just to get folks comfortable working with data in any capacity whatsoever. At different times, we will talk about things that are very strategic planning oriented, like AI and its role on campus, or like data governance, and have folks from our data governance office come in and really coach us up. That's something we want to consistently circle back to and have their buy-in. But other than that, I see it much more as like a interdisciplinary group, that our responsibility is evangelizing data on campus in any way that we possibly can.
Any more questions? Well, thank you, everyone. Great afternoon. I don't think there are any closing remarks planned, but we could probably tap into other breakout rooms at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent.
Thanks.
To spreadsheets. If we can figure out a way to get the spreadsheets to export that way, then that would be one of the goals. But for now, it's just living in dashboards. So I hope I wasn't supposed to record the presentation. I thought it was already happening. You have a special setup for how you capture data that is off by a year. The financial aid section data is 1 year ahead for the US news, and we typically are one.
Right, it's not a prediction model. I just want to make it clear here to the Abhishek dog. So yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. It's been an awesome presentation. I know I am.
Right. It's projection, yes.
Sorry, are you still responding? I think you might be, at least on my end, breaking out, or maybe I'm breaking out. I don't know.
I think she's breaking up a little bit.
Okay, it's not me. That's good. So as I'm recording, I don't want to be the one where the technical failures are, because there's always mandatory technical failures with these things. So I'm trying to keep them small. Hong, do you just want to repeat what you said? I don't know quite